Welcome everyone to our deep dive into sacred geometry. I bet most of you, like me, remember geometry from school as all about angles and proofs and things like that.
Right, sines and cosines.
Exactly. But today we're going to explore a whole different side of geometry.
Definitely. A side that's fascinated people for centuries, really. Artists, architects, philosophers, spiritual seekers, all drawn to this idea of sacred geometry.
And I think for me, and maybe our listeners too, geometry always seemed kind of, I don't know, rigid. Like there's a right answer and a wrong answer.
Oh, yeah. It can definitely feel very structured, rule-based.
Right. So what makes this sacred geometry different?
Well, it goes beyond just those practical applications, right? I mean, think about it. It invites us to see these shapes and patterns as a kind of symbolic language, a way of understanding the hidden order and beauty of the universe.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I got to admit, I'm going to need a little more than that.
Sure.
What exactly is sacred geometry? How is it different from, the geometry we all learned in textbooks?
It's a great question. Let's think about it this way. In regular geometry, we're focused on, like you said, measurements, calculations, practical applications, building a bridge, making sure it doesn't fall down kind of thing.
Right, right.
But in sacred geometry, we're exploring the deeper meaning behind those shapes and patterns, the way they connect to the very essence of creation itself.
Oh, okay. So it's not just knowing that a triangle has three sides. It's like understanding what that triangle might represent on a symbolic level.
Exactly. You got it. It's about exploring that intuitive, that right brain understanding of shapes, their deeper significance. Like Miranda Lundy, she describes sacred geometry as charting the unfolding of number in space. It's like this cosmic dance almost between numbers and shapes, all pointing towards something much bigger than ourselves.
I love that image, this cosmic dance. It really makes geometry feel a lot more dynamic and alive.
Yeah.
So where do we actually see this sacred geometry? Was it just some concept thought up by ancient philosophers, or does it show up in the real world?
Oh, it definitely shows up in the real world. In fact, you can find examples of it all throughout history, really, and across so many different cultures.
Okay.
Think about the pyramids of Egypt, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
Those incredible structures are just a testament to how deeply they understood and could work with geometric principles. And it wasn't just the Egyptians.
Yeah, you're right. I've always been fascinated by those massive stone circles like Stonehenge. It's like,
Yeah.
how did they even build something like that with that kind of precision, using only the tools they had back then?
It really makes you wonder, right? And you see evidence of sacred geometry in the megalithic structures all over Europe, the ziggurats of Sumeria, ancient Chinese architecture, the temples in India. You even see it in the indigenous traditions of the Americas. It's a truly global phenomenon.
Wow. I mean, it makes you wonder, right? If all of these civilizations, were they communicating with each other somehow, or did they each independently discover the power and the significance of these geometric patterns?
That's a question that has fascinated scholars for centuries. Some people believe that there was some shared body of knowledge, spread across the ancient world,
Okay.
while others think it was more like independent discovery. But regardless of, what the answer really is, what's undeniable is that geometry really played a vital role in the development of human civilization.
I mean, it makes sense, especially when you think about architecture. Understanding these geometric principles, they would have been so essential for designing and constructing these buildings, especially these massive temples and monuments.
Absolutely, yeah. And architecture, people sometimes call it frozen music. You could say that music itself is composed using the language of geometry. And it's not even just about creating sturdy structures, right? It's about imbuing these structures with meaning, with symbolism.
Yeah.
It's about a sense of harmony with the cosmos.
Well, those ancient builders were really trying to capture the essence of the universe and what they were creating.
Hmm.
And it's not just architecture, right? I mean, we see geometry in art, music, even handicrafts.
Exactly, exactly. Think about those intricate patterns you see in a Persian rug, or those symmetrical designs in a Celtic knot, or all the repeating motifs in Islamic art. Geometry is everywhere, once you start to really look for it.
Sure, yeah.
And let's not forget nature itself. From the spiral patterns of a seashell to the hexagonal structure of a honeycomb, geometry is the language that nature speaks.
So you're saying that, like, the same mathematical ratio that you find in the seashell, it's also present in the spiral of a galaxy.
You got it.
That's wild. Tell me more about how that works.
Okay, well, that brings us to this concept of dynamic symmetry.
Okay.
Think about like a really beautiful painting, right? It's not just a bunch of random brushstrokes. There's a balance, a certain harmony to the composition. And that's what dynamic symmetry is all about. It's
Okay.
about understanding those proportions and relationships that create this sense of visual pleasure.
Right.
One of the most famous examples is something called the phi ratio. You might have heard it called the golden mean.
I think I have heard of that. Yeah, the
Yeah.
golden ratio. It's that special number, right?
Mm.
Like 1.618 or something like that. And I always hear that it pops up all over the place in nature and art, but I never really um, understood what made it so special.
Right. Well, what's really fascinating about it is that it's not just about aesthetics. Some people believe that it actually reflects a kind of divine proportion, a fundamental building block of the universe.
Okay.
I mean, think about it. This same ratio appears in the human body,
Hmm.
in the spirals of galaxies, even in the arrangement of petals in a flower. It suggests this hidden order, a connection between the microcosm and the macrocosm.
So it's like this secret code almost that unlocks this beauty and this harmony in both the natural world and the man-made world.
It's a great way to put it, and it's just one example of how sacred geometry reveals the interconnectedness of all things.
Wow, this is mind-blowing. Like geometry is not just about numbers and shapes. It's like a whole way of seeing the world.
That's right.
Speaking of seeing the world, wasn't there that famous anecdote about Plato's Academy?
Oh, you mean the one with the inscription?
Yeah, yeah.
The one above the entrance that said, "Let none enter here who are ignorant of geometry."
Exactly, yeah.
It speaks volumes about the importance the ancient Greeks placed on geometry. It wasn't just some practical skill.
Hmm.
For them, it was a pathway to higher understanding.
Oh, wow. So geometry like a prerequisite for philosophy and spiritual exploration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They believed that grasping geometry, it was essential for grappling with those, with even more profound metaphysical concepts.
It's like geometry was boot camp for the mind,
Yeah.
right? Get you ready for the really big questions
Yeah.
about, existence and the universe and all of that.
Yeah, I like that.
And that idea that geometry is really this key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe. I mean, that really ties into this concept of God as the great geometrician.
It does. It does. And that's where things get really interesting because you start to see this convergence of science and spirituality and art all woven together by these threads of sacred geometry.
Okay, now you have to tell me more about this God
Yeah.
as the great geometrician idea. I mean, it sounds like, is this the idea that God used geometry as the blueprint for creation?
That's it. Think about that quote from Johannes Kepler where he said, "Geometry existed before the creation. Geometry provided God with a model for the creation."
Mm-hmm.
It's like God was this cosmic architect,
Yeah.
meticulously designing the universe using these principles of geometry.
Wow. And it wasn't just Kepler, right? I mean, we have quotes from St. Augustine and Galileo talking about the divine nature of numbers and mathematics. It seems like this idea really resonated with people across different disciplines and spiritual beliefs even.
It did. It did. It speaks to this deep intuition, I think, that there is a hidden order to the universe, a design that goes beyond what we can perceive with just our senses.
So it's not just random chaos. You're saying there's a plan, a blueprint, a geometric structure underlying everything.
That's the idea. And the more we understand that structure, the more we can appreciate the beauty and the elegance of the universe and our place in it.
This is so fascinating. But I have to admit, I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed. We've gone from basic triangles and squares to this mind-blowing concept of God as a cosmic architect
Yeah.
using geometry to design the whole universe. I mean, where do we even go from here?
Well, I think it's important to remember that even the most complex structures, they're all built from these simple elements.
Right.
And that brings us to the tools of the trade, the compass and the straight edge.
Wait, you're talking about those classic geometry tools, the ones we all used in school. I mean, how do those simple tools connect to this grand vision of sacred geometry?
Think about it. With just a compass and a straight edge, you can create, an infinite array of patterns and designs.
Okay.
You can draw circles and squares and triangles and then, combine them to create more complex forms.
Okay.
It's kind of like, building with Lego bricks. You have a few simple elements, but you can use them to create this endless variety of structures.
So the compass and the straight edge are like the building blocks of sacred geometry. And
Yeah.
by understanding how to use them, we can start to unlock the secrets of this hidden language almost.
That's it. And that's what the Freemasons with their Masonic geometry, that's exactly what they were trying to do.
Okay. Now we're getting into some secret society stuff here. What's the deal with Masonic geometry? Is it all about hidden symbols and secret rituals?
Well, at its core, Masonic geometry is about using those simple tools, the compass and the straight edge, to explore these fundamental principles of creation. They believed that by understanding these principles, they could gain insight into the nature of God and the universe.
So it's like a spiritual practice almost,
Yep.
a way of connecting with the divine through the act of creation.
I think that's a great way to put it. And it's something that, that anyone can do, whether you're a Freemason or not. You don't need special knowledge. You don't need to be initiated. All you need is a compass, a straight edge, and a curious mind.
I love that. Well, we've been talking for a while now, and maybe we should take a quick break and come back to this. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface here with this whole sacred geometry thing.
I agree. There's so much more to explore.
There is.
From the practical applications of these principles to the deeper philosophical and spiritual implications.
All right, listeners, we'll be back in a flash to continue our deep dive into this fascinating world of sacred geometry. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the Freemasons and their fascination with using the compass and the straight edge to really explore these principles of sacred geometry.
Yeah.
It all sounds very hands-on, which I got to say, it's kind of a refreshing change from just, reading about these geometric theorems in a textbook.
It is, and that hands-on aspect is really crucial, I think, to truly understanding sacred geometry. I mean, it's one thing to look at a diagram in a book, but it's a whole other experience to actually, draw those lines yourself.
Yeah.
Feel the compass in your hand and actually see those shapes kind of emerge before your eyes.
It's like the difference between reading about cooking and actually getting in the kitchen and getting your hands dirty.
That's a great analogy.
You can read all the recipes in the world, but until you actually start, chopping vegetables and mixing ingredients, you're not really cooking.
And just like, mastering a recipe, it takes practice.
Yeah.
Working with sacred geometry, it's the same way. The more you actually engage with it, the more those deeper layers of understanding start to reveal themselves.
So you're saying it's not enough to just, admire the beauty of a mandala or a rose window, for example.
Right.
To really get it, you need to get your hands dirty with those compasses and straight edges.
Yeah. That's where the real magic happens. By actually constructing these geometric patterns, we start to internalize those principles in a way that reading or just observing can't really can't replicate.
I'm starting to see how this is more than just some intellectual pursuit. It's almost like a meditative practice.
Yeah.
A way of connecting with something larger than yourself through the act of creation.
It is. And a lot of teachers and practitioners of sacred geometry, they really emphasize that hands-on experience. Like Randall Carlson, for instance, he's really passionate about exploring these ancient principles, and he actually uses a lot of hands-on activities in his teaching to really help people grasp these concepts.
That sounds way more engaging than my geometry class back in the day. All I remember is memorizing formulas and proving theorems, but I never really connected with material on that deeper level.
And that's the beauty of it, right? It's about bringing it to life,
Yeah.
making it tangible and experiential. So instead of just, sitting there listening to lectures, imagine a classroom where you're building these geometric models. You're drawing these intricate patterns. You're exploring these relationships between shapes in this dynamic, hands-on way.
It's funny, now that you mention it, I'm remembering those geometric puzzles I used to play with as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Like those wooden blocks that you fit together in different ways to make cubes and pyramids and all these different shapes.
There's a reason why those have captivated people for generations. They offer a glimpse into this elegance, this order that underlies this seemingly chaotic world, right?
Right.
And as we go deeper into this, it becomes clear that sacred geometry, it's not just some abstract concept confined to these dusty textbooks, right? It's really woven into the fabric of our cultural heritage.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about about ancient architecture and those megalithic structures.
Hmm.
But what about, more recent examples of sacred geometry in art and in culture? Did those ancient traditions just kind of fade away?
No, not at all. Think about those. Think about the stained glass windows you see in Gothic cathedrals. Those incredible, intricate designs. They're a testament to how much the medieval artisans really understood geometry, and they weren't just creating pretty pictures. They were actually encoding profound spiritual and philosophical ideas into those geometric patterns.
It's like they were writing stories almost, using shapes and colors instead of words.
Hmm.
And I can only imagine the impact that those windows would have had on the people, worshiping in those cathedrals.
Absolutely. They were designed to really elevate the mind and spirit,
Yeah.
to connect the earthly realm with the divine. And you see those same principles of sacred geometry in Renaissance art as well, like
Right.
Leonardo da Vinci, for instance.
Well, yeah.
He famously incorporated the golden ratio into his masterpieces like the Mona Lisa and the Vitruvian Man.
I always thought that golden ratio thing was a bit mystical. Like some secret code that unlocks beauty and harmony. But you're saying it's actually based on real, like, mathematical principles.
It is. The golden ratio, it's represented by the Greek letter phi,
Hmm.
and it's approximately 1.618. It's this irrational number, meaning it's the decimal representation goes on forever without repeating.
Okay.
And it pops up all over the place in nature.
Hmm.
And artists have used it for centuries to create these really visually pleasing and balanced compositions.
So it's like a mathematical constant that's somehow connected to our sense of aesthetics.
Hmm.
It makes me wonder if there's something deeper going on, like maybe our brains are hardwired to appreciate those proportions.
Yeah.
Because they reflect something fundamental about the universe itself.
Now, that's a fascinating thought, and it really speaks to how deeply ingrained geometry is, in our perception of the world. It's not just about these cold, hard facts. It's about beauty and harmony. It's even, about spirituality.
Speaking of spirituality, didn't some ancient philosophers and mystics believe that geometry actually held the key to understanding the divine?
They did, yeah.
It wasn't just about building temples or creating beautiful art. It was about connecting with something bigger.
Absolutely. Take the concept of the music of the spheres, for example. This idea was really popularized by Pythagoras and his followers,
Okay.
and it basically proposed that the movements of celestial bodies actually created these harmonious sounds that were mathematically related to musical intervals.
So the universe is this giant symphony, and it's orchestrated by these laws of geometry.
I kind of love that. It makes those cold, distant stars and planets feel a lot more alive, a lot more connected to us here on Earth. Yeah.
It does, doesn't it? And even though modern science has, moved beyond that literal interpretation of the music of the spheres,
Yeah.
the underlying idea of mathematical harmony and order in the universe, it's incredibly compelling.
It's like those mesmerizing videos you see of planetary orbits, where everything's
Yeah.
moving in these precise, predictable patterns.
Right.
I know it's both awe-inspiring and a little bit spooky at the same time. Like, is it all just random chance, or is there some intelligent design behind it all?
It definitely speaks to this deeper level of order and intelligence at play,
Yeah.
whether you call it God or the universe or something else entirely.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that makes sacred geometry so fascinating, right?
Mm.
It invites us to contemplate those big questions, to explore the mysteries of existence through the lens of shapes and patterns. It's like this invisible hand almost guiding the cosmic dance, using geometry as the choreography. And the more we understand those steps, the more we can appreciate the beauty and the elegance of the whole performance.
Beautifully put. And as we continue to explore this, we'll discover that those steps are encoded not just in, the grand scale of the cosmos, but also in the smallest details of our everyday lives.
So like those Russian nesting dolls, where you open one and there's another one inside and another and so on. Each one is a smaller version of the whole thing.
That's a fantastic analogy.
Each level, it's like it reveals a smaller but equally intricate version of the whole thing.
It highlights the fractal nature of reality, where those patterns and those principles repeat at different scales. We see it in the branching patterns of trees, the veins in a leaf, even the structure of our own bodies.
It's like this cosmic blueprint that's expressed in everything, from the vastness of space to the tiniest atom. And the more we study that blueprint, the more we understand our place in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. And that understanding can be incredibly empowering, I think,
Mm.
because it helps us see the interconnectedness of all things,
Yeah.
to appreciate the inherent beauty and order of the universe, to approach life with a sense of wonder and reverence.
It's like that saying, as above, so below.
Mm-hmm.
The same principles that govern the stars also govern our own lives. Which brings me to a question I've been wondering about. How can we actually apply, this knowledge of sacred geometry to our own lives? It can't all be,
Yep.
you know, cosmic blueprints and ancient secrets.
No,
Right?
you're right. It's not just about this intellectual understanding. There's a practical side to it as well.
So it's like a toolkit for the soul. It's like
Yeah.
it's giving us these practical methods to create more beauty and balance and meaning in our lives.
Think about how how you design your living space, for example.
Okay.
By incorporating these geometric principles, like the golden ratio, you can create an environment that feels more balanced, more harmonious.
So instead of just, randomly arranging my furniture,
Right.
I should be thinking about proportions and ratios. Like maybe my couch should be 1.618 times longer than my coffee table.
You don't have to necessarily get out a ruler and a calculator for, every design decision.
Right. Okay.
But being mindful of those principles, it can make a big difference. It's about creating this sense of visual flow
Okay.
and balance that just feels naturally pleasing to the eye.
I can see how that applies to art and design.
Mm-hmm.
But what about more practical everyday stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Can sacred geometry help me, I don't know, organize my schedule or be more productive at work?
Absolutely. Think
Yeah.
about time management, right? Have you ever heard of the Pomodoro technique?
I think so, yeah. Doesn't it involve like using a timer and working in intervals?
Yeah, it's a time management method that uses those intervals of focused work with these short breaks in between. And it might seem simple on the surface, but it's actually inspired by the cyclical nature of time, a concept that's deeply rooted in sacred geometry. So it's a subtle way to bring those geometric principles into your daily routine.
So it's like using the rhythm of squares and circles to create a more productive and balanced workday.
That's it. And that same idea of cyclical patterns,
Mhm.
it also applies to personal growth and self-reflection. Think about the cycles of nature, the changing seasons, the phases of the moon. These cycles, they remind us that everything is in constant flux and that growth often involves these periods of expansion and contraction.
Like that famous quote, no man ever steps in the same river twice.
Exactly.
Everything's always changing and we're part of that flow.
Exactly. And by understanding those cycles, we can learn to ride those waves of change more gracefully.
Right.
Embracing both the highs and lows as part of this larger interconnected pattern. It's like learning to surf. You can't control the waves, but you can learn to ride them. And sometimes wiping out is just part of the process.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
But sometimes those waves of change can feel, pretty overwhelming. So how can sacred geometry help us navigate those choppy waters, so to speak?
Well, one of the key takeaways from sacred geometry is this importance of perspective. When we view things from a broader perspective, we can see how these seemingly disparate elements are actually interconnected
Right.
and part of a larger whole.
It's like zooming out on a map, right? What might seem like a chaotic jumble of streets and buildings from up close.
Right.
You zoom out and it reveals itself to be this well-organized city.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can be incredibly powerful because it allows us to see these challenges as opportunities for growth, to find meaning in the midst of, chaos, to connect with something larger than ourselves.
It's like that saying, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff.
Yeah.
When we get caught up in, all the little details, we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we actually shift that perspective? It's easy to say, look at the bigger picture, but it's a lot harder to actually do it when you're in the thick of things and you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed.
And that's where sacred geometry can be really helpful because it provides us with this framework, I think, for expanding our perspective, for seeing the world through this wider lens. It reminds us that we're not just these isolated individuals, but we're these interconnected parts of this vast and intricate web of life.
It's like that feeling you get when you look up at the night sky, at a starry night, and you just realize how small and insignificant all of our little worries and problems really are. It really puts things into perspective.
It does, and that sense of awe and wonder, that feeling of connectedness to something larger than ourselves, is one of the most profound gifts that sacred geometry can offer.
So it's not just about memorizing formulas or drawing these fancy shapes. It's about tapping into this deeper level of understanding and then using that knowledge to live a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
That's exactly it. It's about recognizing those patterns and those principles that underlie all of creation, and then using those insights to navigate all the complexities of life
Yeah.
with more grace, more wisdom, more purpose.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
And we have.
From ancient temples to modern day, time management.
Mhm.
It seems like sacred geometry really touches pretty much every aspect of our lives, and yet I still feel like we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah. There's always more to explore.
Yeah.
Sacred geometry is it's a vast and multifaceted field.
Yeah.
And it offers these endless possibilities for discovery and growth.
So where does someone even begin if they're interested in learning more about sacred geometry? Are there specific books or resources you'd recommend?
There are tons of resources out there.
Okay.
You can find books, websites, workshops. There's even online courses dedicated to exploring all these different aspects of sacred geometry. I
Yeah.
think the best place to start is to just follow your curiosity.
What about that hands-on experience we were talking about earlier? Should people just, grab a compass and a straight edge and start drawing?
Absolutely, yeah. Remember, the real magic of this lies in the experience, in that act of creation and discovery.
Mm.
So don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, to experiment, to see what emerges.
Well, I don't know about you folks listening, but my mind is officially blown.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be seeing the world in a whole new way after this deep dive. It's like I've been given this new pair of glasses that allows me to see this hidden order and this beauty that's been there all along.
I'm so glad to hear that. And as we conclude our exploration, I'd like to leave you with a question to ponder. How might understanding these principles of sacred geometry actually change your perception of the world around you? From the natural world to art and architecture, and everything in between.
That is a great question to take with us as we continue our own journeys of discovery. Thanks for joining us on this incredible adventure into the world of sacred geometry. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep looking for those hidden patterns that connect us all. That was a really fascinating discussion about how sacred geometry can maybe help us navigate life's ups and downs and all of that. But I got to admit, I'm still a little fuzzy on how it all actually works in practice. It's easy to talk about seeing the bigger picture and connecting to something larger than ourselves, but how do we actually apply these principles in our day-to-day lives?
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely one thing to grasp these concepts intellectually, but it's quite another to really integrate them into our lived experience. So maybe the best way to illustrate this is through some examples. Remember how we were talking about applying the golden ratio to design a more harmonious living space?
Right. Yeah.
Well, that same principle can be extended to other areas of our lives.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Okay, consider the concept of balance.
Okay.
In sacred geometry, we see balance reflected in symmetrical forms, in the interplay of light and shadow, in the harmonious proportions of shapes. And we can actually apply this principle to our own lives by seeking balance in our daily activities, our relationships, even our thoughts and emotions.
So it's not just about achieving a perfectly symmetrical living room.
Right.
You're saying it's about finding that sense of equilibrium in all aspects of our lives.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that, too much of anything, it can throw us off balance. Too much work, not enough rest, that can lead to burnout.
Yeah.
Too much focus on the external world and not enough on our inner world can lead to this sense of disconnection. So sacred geometry reminds us to really strive for that harmony, that balance in all that we do.
I can see how that would be helpful. Is like a reminder to check in with ourselves regularly, make sure we're not neglecting any important areas of our lives.
Exactly. And just as a skilled architect uses those geometric principles to create a building that's structurally sound and aesthetically pleasing,
Right.
we can use those same principles to create a life that's more balanced, more fulfilling.
This is starting to make a lot more sense. So it's not about memorizing these formulas or becoming an expert geometer. It's about understanding those underlying principles,
Yeah.
of harmony and balance and interconnectedness that are reflected in those geometric forms, and then using those insights to guide our decisions and actions in the real world.
You got it.
Doctor.
It's about seeing the world through a different lens, one that allows us to perceive the beauty and the order that often lies hidden beneath the surface of things.
This has been such an enlightening conversation. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for geometry, not just as a subject I learned in school, but as this profound and powerful way of understanding the universe and our place within it.
I'm so glad to hear that, and I hope that that this deep dive has sparked a sense of curiosity and wonder in you.
It has, yeah.
A desire to continue exploring these mysteries of sacred geometry.
Yeah.
And its relevance to your own life.
It definitely has. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? Any final words of wisdom or guidance?
I just encourage everyone to approach this subject with an open mind and a playful spirit.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to experiment, to explore these different resources and to find what resonates with you. Sacred geometry, it's a journey, not a destination. And the real magic is in the discovery, the insights, and the connections that you make along the way.
That's beautiful. And on that note, we'd like to thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of sacred geometry. We hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep looking for those hidden patterns that connect us all.